the mirror was held up. Sometimes when you're in the frame, you can't see the picture. And that was certainly the case, is that I was so wrapped up again, swept up by other people's expectations.
What really gets us to the point where we're actually going to create this passion and purpose and to actually go and make a difference?
When you are effortlessly in flow, it's because there is no push against anything that is restricting you or not aligned.
Hi, and welcome to Accelerating Your Wealth with your host, myself, Rebecca Robertson. I'm an independent financial advisor and wealth coach. I'm the director of Evolution Financial Planning, who is also our sponsor for today's show. Welcome to the show. This is Accelerating Your Wealth with Rebecca Robertson, your host. And I am talking today to the beautiful Amy Rowlinson. Welcome, Amy.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
We're going to be talking about how to create meaningful financial success by the time you're 50 or sooner.
Yeah, why wait?
Why wait? Amy's retired her husband. How old was he then?
Let's think. It's definitely under 50. So he was... Oh my goodness, I'm trying to think, 48?
Okay,
yeah.
So that's pretty good going. You created passive income.
Yes, no such thing, just saying, as passive.
No such thing as passive.
Not completely.
Not completely. We can talk about that. And you didn't downsize, you right-sized your home. And you've done that in the way of having a meaningful, passionate, if you like, on purpose career change all at the same time.
Yeah, when you say it like that, it sounds impressive, but also quite intense. And it has been a little bit intense, but it's been over a period of time. It wasn't all at once.
No, of course. So tell me, where did it start?
Oh, well, probably 2016 was the first time that I really understood that something had to change. My husband came home from work. It was late. I'd also had a long day at work. And when he walked through the door, I just saw a very different version of John, and it was a grey, ashen, burnt out version. And it was one of those moments where you go, this is not sustainable. Something has to change. And it'd been on my mind for a while that what I was doing in terms of my work wasn't quite fulfilling. And so I made a decision to resign the next day and do something about it. I didn't have any idea what I was going to do. I just knew that I had to do something. So that started me on a journey. It actually took me 3 years to build a property portfolio that would allow John to retire. But in that time, he also went down to 3 days a week, which is unheard of in the city at the time. He was definitely...
Yeah.
It was an opportunity for him to trailblaze in that sense, that it is possible not to have to sell your soul and work crazy hours. You can also do something different. So yes, 3 years took us to the beginning of October 2019, and he took over the running of that portfolio, which freed me up to do what I really wanted, which is what I do now.
Well, what a nutshell of a lot of work, and I've got so many questions I want to dig into that 1 or 2 minutes of explanation, and just taking you right back to that being really brave and just going in the next day and resigning. I have people come to me, clients come to me, who may spend 4 or 5 years thinking about, how am I going to resign? How can I step back? And people get on that sort of rat run where, they're relying on those salaries. Financially, they need that income. And stepping back from that can be a big lifestyle change. And certainly for women that are single on their own, they're concerned about, well, how am I going to support myself? They don't know who to talk to about it. They're on their own. They don't know who to bounce ideas off. And if you ask friends and family, you're going to get a very different answer to that brave kind of, go for it. Unless you're speaking to like an entrepreneurial person that's sort of been there, done that. So they're really concerned about, well, what does that look like? What's that future going to look like? So what was going through your brain at that time? You didn't spend years thinking about it. What gave you the inclination that it was all going to be okay and that sod it, I'm going to do it?
Yeah, there was a huge amount of trust and belief in whatever I put my mind to, I know will turn out okay. I have got that starter-finisher ability of focusing on something. Hyperfocus, you might call it. ADHD, you might call it also, in terms of going into that hyperfocus. But there was a deep trust that there was no alternative at this point to do anything other than create a different lifestyle for us. So it started a series of conversations that, one, I'd like to resign. Work did try and persuade me otherwise. It took several weeks before it actually happened. And in that time, also, there was a summer holiday where we were able to go out to my dad's house in France and just have that ability to completely reset and redesign what it meant to us, what we were looking to achieve. John and I, as a team, as a partnership, have always had aligned values and understanding of what it is we want to do. And we've taken it in turns over the years of who has stepped forward, who's stepped back in the sense of raising children or being present to that. So it wasn't an overnight huge decision in terms of, right, I'm jumping ship. And I do advocate that you don't need to jump ship. It may be that there are other options. For us, that was the right decision at that time. And yes, it was, oh my goodness, who is this person in front of me? This is enough. This is not sustainable decision for me in that moment. But then what we did is we looked at all of the things that were going on. So in terms of an income, in terms of our outgoings, in terms of our general expenditure, in terms of what it is that we wanted to do long term, we did a big audit, and we recognised that we had been swept up with other people's expectations, with different versions of success that weren't really aligned to John and me. And when we took that time to do the audit, we recognised that we didn't need to have the income that we'd been aspiring for individually and collectively. We didn't need to have so many other things. And part of that decision was also the long term, we didn't need to have the house that we were living in. And with that came the mortgage, and with that came all of the other outgoings and expenditure, the monthly bills. So it was a real assessment of what is it we want? What is it we are looking to achieve together?
But many people don't do that.
No, and we hadn't. So it's not like I'm here saying, oh, this is all amazing and I'm amazing. I'd just been on autopilot, and we had been swept up with environment. And that was also the workplace environment, but the other parents of the kids that we were socialising with, just a lot of things were compounding, and we just hadn't paused.
But that, as a society, I think the reason we don't look at that is because we're taught, and we're, from a marketing perspective, even listening to the radio, it's all about the latest car. It's always about, I recently had a hire car, and it felt great having this hire car, and everyone was like, wow, is that your new car? And that kind of buzz that you get from it. And the same thing happens when you move house. You have everyone over into a new house. And I see that with clients. They're looking for a bigger house and a bigger car and the next bigger holiday. And actually, it doesn't really align with their values. They get to the end of the year, they don't know where all their money's gone. Some people are in a lot more debt than, they like to admit. And they're not paying into investments or building a growth or doing the other things, still having to work for longer, but at the same time they've had years and years of debt. And the reason for that is because economically banks want you to be in debt. Economically, the financial services in general, the car companies, where it's the latest mobile phone, the latest trainers, whatever, they're marketing, they're selling something, and they've got the budget to sell it to us. So it takes, again, I think, quite a brave person to really step back and say, what are my values? So for you to do that, at that point, you wasn't on the personal development train?
No, not at that point. So it started in 2014 when I made the decision to go back to work. I'd been at home since 2002, raised on maternity leave, and then having two children and being very present to them and raising them such that I wasn't working out of the home, because it is a full-time job. It can be a full-time job. And also because John was away a lot, it did require me to be present at home. So it was a case of, I'd gone back to work in 2014. purely because I'd been headhunted, actually. I'd done a big community project and I'd received an award at Lord's Cricket Ground for an outstanding service to cricket. And somebody said, I'd love you to come and work with me. I'm setting up a new startup. I'd love you to be part of that. And 2 years later, I got that invite again. So I didn't really plan to go back to work. You asked about personal development. I tried to do some preparation, some research of getting myself back into the mindset. I hadn't been in an office since 2002. I felt quite nervous about that. Well, it took about half an hour before I realised, yeah, I know which end of a stapler to use. And I was absolutely flying again. I love growth. I love learning. So the personal development shelves had massively swollen since I'd last been in a bookshop from 2002. I'd been in the children's book section for a long time. And yeah, this was very exciting because I love personal growth, transformation across all areas, actually. That is a common theme. So no, personal development hadn't been part of my life, and then it was very much so, and continues to be.
So what sparked that? I mean, who was the one that looked back and went, hang on a minute, was it coming from more from a frugal perspective and saying we need to cut back? Or was it more on like a values perspective, saying this is not aligning with our values?
It was a combination. So John is very financially aware. He's worked in the financial industry for his entire career. And what had happened is he'd done a maths and stats degree. Then we met when he was doing his second degree, and he was doing international securities and finance and management. And he was niching in his own career, such that he didn't have that broad outlook on our life as much as he would have been able and capable, because he was so focused on his particular role at work. And I was very guilty of outsourcing all financial decisions to him. So he was the one that dealt with all the mortgages or all of the insurances. I was running the house and the household, but he was definitely much more in control and responsible for that area. And so I actually had quite poor financial literacy generally. And it's only now, or it's on the journey, that I realised just quite how much I had abdicated that responsibility to him. And that wasn't fair either. So yes, it was individual values. It was a case of understanding we are so out of alignment with what matters to us. Yes, we'd been swept up with living out other people's expectations. And yeah, consumer marketing plays into that. So does influence of your peers, of your friends. And we did that audit, and John has always been very frugal. We had a fun thing called Half the Difference, which we used to apply when we were out, and it would give us some kind of incentive for future saving by, instead of getting instead of getting a taxi home, which was very expensive, we would get the tube, and we would put half that difference that we saved into a future pot. So we were working towards lots of things for the future in the present.
So there's a saying that I say is like, do something today that your future self will thank you for.
Yeah.
And that's what Half the Difference sounds like to me.
Exactly that. Absolutely. So it's all about deferred gratification instead of instant gratification. And yeah, John was definitely the instigator of that. I was much more in the moment. Yeah, just spend it. Let's have fun. And he was, yeah, we can still have fun, but we'll have it tomorrow or next year or in 10 years' time. And, I'm very grateful for his sort of outlook there.
And how did it feel for him when that abdication changed, and you went from being, not doing any involvement to actually running a property portfolio?
Yeah, it was huge for him because he could see the light at the end of the tunnel. His whole outlook changed. He was still working for 3 years longer than he'd wanted to be, but it wasn't the 10, 15 years that he had a spreadsheet that was forecast based on where we were and what our outgoings were. And that part of that audit was to understand actually we don't really need to be living in the house that we're living for much longer. Once the children are off to university, we don't need that. In fact, it's crazy because it served a purpose at the time. It was good for commuting, it was good for schools, and it didn't need to be that forever.
So you've recently moved. Had you sold and moved previously to that then?
No, so we'd been there for almost 19 years in that one house. It was a 2-bed bungalow that I spent 2.5 years refurbishing to change into a 6-bed house. So it was a big project. There's a transformation again. And it was really great because we found this place that ticked all of the boxes, but it did require us to do the work to change it into what we wanted it to be. But yeah, we didn't need to be there forever. And with mortgage rates changing, it would be quite a burden with the change that from when we first moved there to now. So yeah, we had a 2-year plan that involved us moving in July 2025.
So talking about just starting a property portfolio from somebody that knew nothing about property, and he was still working at the time, and it sounds like, was he involved in that process or?
Not really. So we'd become accidental landlords. When we moved into that house that I spoke about, we actually kept our previous one purely because at the point of exchange, the buyers of our house pulled out. And so instead of it being a case of a simple sell that house, buy the next one, we then had to let it to buy our next house. So we became accidental landlords. And that was the case for a good 10 years before we realised actually there are other options here. We could change that into a house of multiple occupancy, which would be more efficient in terms of income. And I'd gone to a seminar in the week that I'd left, in fact, the day after I left my job, on how to do well in property or auctions at property, buy property from auctions. And I went to this seminar. And of course, it was just a hook to get me involved in some kind of property investing education, but I saw value in it. So I did subscribe to the 3-day weekend that they offered to learn more about property. And then again, I was upsold and I signed up for a year program. Well, I did fast track that program into 3 months. So within 3 months, I was then buying properties to then convert into houses of multiple occupancy. And that's what I did. And that's
where did you get the money down for that? Did
So
you have to raise out of the existing house?
We understood that we had quite a lot of equity, having done the big house transformation, that we'd been paying down our mortgage and had been for years. And we'd also previously paid down the mortgage on our first home together. So that was always the model, pay off the mortgage. Didn't realise that there was an opportunity to use some of that money from the house to put down onto buying the properties.
Can I ask a question? So, and I think this is a really interesting point, and which is why I'm sorry to interrupt.
No.
But a lot of people, a society, again, we're taught to buy the bigger house, and then move into a bigger house. And then once you reach that point, then you're encouraged, pay off your mortgage, clear your mortgage, to have no debt. And my point is that, well, actually, sometimes, not all the time, can't guarantee rates of return on investments. But if that money was in some sort of investment vehicle, there's obviously different tax benefits to different vehicles. But you might get anything from a 5, 10, 15, 20% returns. It varies. Markets go up and down. There is a risk with investing. However, that's often lower than most mortgage rates. So in examples where you have a client who can afford the mortgage, they're not in financial difficulty, should they overpay their mortgage or should they invest? It's like an atypical question that I get a lot of. But society-wise, a lot of people are encouraged by family, clear your mortgage, have no mortgage. And my husband's very much a stable, secure kind of guy. We call him Mr. Security Guy. So he's all about building security and building wealth alongside that. So for you, that was like why you did what you did. But then afterwards, you obviously reaped the benefit of that and realising the leverage that you had. You know, if you'd have saved that money and not paid the mortgage down, that money that you would have paid in potentially could have been more, and then you could have drawn on investments. But there's a risk with that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not advocating this as a model because everybody has different starting points, different intentions, different desires for the future. This is just, it worked for us to release some equity from our home, which allowed me to buy property in bulk. Essentially, I had 4 in one go, where I was then able to do the projects, to then refinance and pull out the money to start again. So it was a case of, yes, this model works. And in terms of using the equity that we had on a very low interest rate, it was good lending. It made financial sense to do that. But it was a case of, there's always going to be a point when you run out of money. So after that, I was then able to use angel investing from high net worth investors and use some of their money to do exactly the same model that I'd proven, such that I could then carry on building a portfolio, buying a property, refinancing, paying back the angels, and then carrying on.
How did you find those angels?
At networking events, and also understanding that there are people out there who that's what they want to do. Some of them were peers, some of them were friends. And it is a case of having to do the due diligence and ensuring.
It's a non-regulated market, so I'm
Absolutely.
really cautious about people getting into property and just turning up somewhere and handing money over.
No, absolutely. And this is something that is such a dangerous area in terms of investing. And yes, it is unregulated. There are intentions for that to change, and there are many ways that you can have some reassurances on those properties that you are investing in. You can put restrictions on the property, you can have various guarantees. But yeah, it worked for us. We did hit COVID on a couple of projects. I actually then felt uncomfortable because of the unknown future. We were in a good place to be able to pay back our angels and say, I don't want you to be at risk. So we actually paid back some big loans because we could. And that was a case of, we would always have skin in the game, as they say. I was never at a point where I was over leveraging what I was doing.
But for a long time during that process, you became a property coach.
Yeah, and that was the thing, is having gone on some of the education programs, which were fantastic, got me to a point that I needed to go to. There was also some gaps, and there were some gaps from the practical side of property investing. And that's what I helped others to close. And I'm still helping people close gaps now, but that's just in a different area in terms of purpose. So yes, that was the evolution. I built my own portfolio, and then I helped others to do the same. So I did become a property mentor and was running sessions, network event. And that's what took me up to the beginning of lockdown, where I thought we were going to take that training business online. But my business partner had other plans, and he shared with me on that first day of lockdown, 23rd of March 2020, yeah, Amy, I'm not in love with this anymore. And after a week of quite a lot of tears and snot, and because it had been some sweat equity to get to that point, to build up all of the reputation, the credibility of this is what I'm now going to do, I recognised it just been a vehicle to get me to where I needed to go. It wasn't what my focus wanted to be or needed to be. So yeah, it was initially an upsetting time, but it was actually a fantastic door that got closed because it opened the next one.
Yeah, let's say one door closes, another one opens.
100%.
And so then you'd created the property portfolio. Your husband by then was still 3 days, or had he actually stopped work by that point?
2016, 30 September 2016 was when I started, and 3rd of October 2019 he retired.
Okay, wow. So by 2020 he was weeks feet up.
Well, we were going to go travelling, right? That was the plan. Let's go travelling, and then lockdown hit. So then I had this brilliant idea of focus on why. I literally woke up because we were doing a closeout to the podcast that we had together for the property, and I was really, really keen to direct my listeners to a new podcast. And so I had this idea for Focus on Why. that's what I woke up with on the 1st of April, 2020. And then by the
Wow.
30th of April, 2020, I'd already recorded 30 episodes. And here I am now, 500.
So you could say that your old business partner inspired you.
I have lots to thank him for sure.
Yeah. I think there's a story there.
Well, it's always the case of when you think that things aren't quite going the right way, actually, there's always a reason. And I'm very grateful for that. So no, it was initially upsetting, but no, I'm very happy now.
I believe in divine purpose and divine timing, right?
Yeah.
There's people, business partners that I've been with over 10 years ago, running my business for 15 years. And at the time, it's really hurt. Like some of the things that happened were really hurtful. I thought they were friends. But actually, I look back now and I'm grateful for the experience. It means now, as I move my business forward, I've learned what I should and shouldn't be doing for my sake and for others. So I think there's always a learning in there somewhere. It's just once you get over the snot and the tears it takes a little while. So you found your why within someone else's actions, basically, and so then you stopped doing. You wasn't inspired to carry on doing property on your own.
Yeah, the mirror was held up. Sometimes when you're in the frame, you can't see the picture. And that was certainly the case, is that I was so wrapped up, again, swept up by other people's expectations and also the praise. So when I'd been encouraged and it's like, oh, it's amazing what you've done, coming along and do this with me. I was like, yeah, great, let's do that. And this, again, was not a conscious decision. I'd been wrapped up in what else was possible. So yes, the focus on why is an imperative that help me focus on why I'm doing what I'm doing. And that is very much a sustainable, healthy lifestyle that I'm creating. And that has rippled across all areas of my business and my life.
So why did the why become important to you?
Because it was about shining the light on what's possible when you focus on why. So when you understand what it is that you are capable of, what it is that you want to do, what it is that you are passionate about, wrapping up all these different areas of really aligning your work and life with your values, not just your core values, but I talk about success values. This is about creating a meaningful way of life. And I had lived in my own shadow for so many years, not believing that I could do various things. I held myself back. I was definitely holding myself as a prisoner to other people's versions of success, limiting beliefs that I held about myself. And I've been working on that. That personal development journey is ongoing. And I'm now over 10 years into that. And there's so much more. Every year I surprise myself by what I can achieve. And it's so much fun.
So what would, young Amy, so if you go back to Amy from, I don't know, before children, before John, before property, before personal development, if you were talking to that young Amy now, I know from a personal development, it's an onion. There's constant layers, constant findings. And I'm still this week, I've discovered an issue around my own self-image that I didn't really realise that I had. And so what would you say to that younger version of Amy? Like, how would you talked about accelerating the process, even with everything. You've accelerated everything super quick, because sometimes it takes people more than just a few years to do what you've achieved. It might take a whole lifetime, right? And you seem to have reinvented, transformed, and done so much. So I guess I'm looking for what advice you would give to others, but really by speaking to yourself, your younger self, what would you say to that younger version?
The younger version is difficult because you're still evolving as a person, and also the person for the timeline that you're describing would have been in my early 20s. So, because I've been with John for 30 years now. So early 20s, there's still a very different focus there than there is when you're in 30s, 40s, 50s, purely because of what you want to achieve, what you also want to discover. It's still very much an encountering more about who you are. So yes, there is the message that I would say is staying aligned to your values at that point and doing that work to understand who you are. That is really important because it's difficult to strip out who you are and your core identity when there is so much influence, the different paradigms that we're exposed to. At that point, you would have had your familial, cultural, workplace, educational, your peers, the social. There's so many different overlays that you don't necessarily know who you are at that point because you just haven't been exposed to opportunities or environments where you can demonstrate who you are. But there is an underlying what matters. What is it that you care about, that you're going to stand for? And that hasn't really changed. That I was talking to someone the other day and I recognised at age 4, I stood up for what matters. And that was for the welfare of the classroom. We had a teacher that used to hit us with a ruler and I actually thought, that's not okay. And I went to the headmistress and as a little 4-year-old knocking on the door and said, this is not okay. So I do, I do stand up for what matters. And that understanding what you can and what you can't control is really key to challenge the status quo and capture what really matters. As a combination is really important. And you can do that at any age. But it is, again, it's just stopping to take that audit, to switch off the autopilot from existing to consciously living with intention. That's probably the message that I'll just be challenging. Is that what you really believe, or is that what you think you need to believe to fit in?
And financially, money-wise, I think there's a lot of procrastination for people. They put a lot of things off. They put off, overpaying on their mortgage or having the education to understand what that would mean to invest. They're delegating responsibilities potentially to other partners. And so then when you're in your 20s and you don't know what you don't know, it's very difficult then to have that future gratification. And, your half, what did you call it? Your half
the difference.
The difference. Well, I want to go out this weekend. I'm trying to say that to my 17-year-old now. Like, she lives in the day, in the moment. And I sometimes, admire that. It's a great way to live, that she's literally living for today. She's not thinking about next week or next month. And I think that's part of our growth. So what do you think people can do to sort of recognise or see that they're procrastinating and that they actually, maybe there is a brick wall instead of a mirror in front of them?
I think it's a twofold thing. It's understanding what you're doing right now in the present, but also having an understanding of what the future holds so that you have prepared for it. I feel I'm lucky as a couple because John had a lot more financial literacy at the outset. But because of that, I also did outsource a lot of responsibility. And now I understand more around what it means to be financially aware and financially literate. It opens up so much possibility and gives you the freedom to choose. But if you don't know what is ahead of you in the future, you are going to limit your choices when you get there. So it's about understanding now. And when I say now, I'm 50, 51 next week. It's a case of in your 20s, understand what it's like to be 50. And I know it's going to be an impossible ask to say that, but if you can future pace, this is what it would be good to be comfortable in terms of, I thought we needed a lot more than we needed and we didn't. And that was about aligning with what really matters. So yes, we right-sized because we didn't need to have that big home, and it now gives us freedom and possibility to do lots of things. So yeah, the biggest lesson would be to understand opportunities and options. And what better person like someone like you?
Oh, thanks. Well, I wouldn't say I'm a property expert, and I used to have a lot of clients come to us and say, "Oh, what do you think about property?" I think it's becoming a less of a buzz these days, because accidental landlords are happening less because of the tax implications. Obviously, you can't deduct your mortgage as an expense anymore, and just with the tax rules that are coming into play, obviously the government are trying to make it so that people are finding it harder to build property portfolios. So I'm not having as many inquiries anymore. And for a lot of women, I found, particularly women and men, certainly sort of, young families were looking for property as an opportunity like you have. And there was just so many hoops to jump through. And I think there's now an increased amount of hoops, that it's hard to start now to do those things. So when people are coming to me, I sort of point them in that direction. That's an option. I'm not someone that's completely adverse to it. I believe in having a diverse portfolio and having investments, and if you wish to get into property. But I explain to them it's a job. You need to see it as a job. It's not passive, as we were saying right at the beginning. It's a job in itself. So you have to I was talking to somebody yesterday about a SAS pension. Like, can you set it up? Yes, I can set it up, but you're the trustee effectively of this pension. You need to understand how that actual pension operates. And obviously you can buy commercial property through a SAS. I'm not advocating it. No advice is given on this podcast.
No, and it is really a big decision to make, because we did take personal control of our own future by converting our pensions into a SAS. And again, it's not an easy decision, and it's not one to be flippant about, because it is a big decision and it is a big responsibility.
Let's move on and talk about your book and talk a little bit more about the work you do, because you can tell by the way Amy's talking, she's not your average property coach, and she's very much coming from a neurological understanding a thought process. So this is Amy's book, which is Focus on Why, and I'm just going to read a little section. Challenge the status quo. Does your life lack purpose and direction? Are you feeling unfulfilled in life and work? Do you long to make a difference but feel overwhelmed by the daily demands in striving for that perfect life? And are you sacrificing your health to the point of burnout? Are you asleep walking, drifting aimlessly and mindlessly, scrolling through social media or binge watching TV? That got me hooked. I started reading. I was like, okay, I need to read this book. So talk me through, obviously I'm not asking for your full framework, but obviously there's a process that's delivered within this to take people from focusing on why and creating a purposeful, meaningful life. So in a nutshell, how do people do that?
Read the book. It was important for me to provide a structure, a practical structure that you can hook onto. And there are 9 steps in that process, of which there are 3 areas that they belong to, each of them. So purpose, plan, and focus are the 3 core areas. And then within those, there are 3 steps. I broke it down into that way. And what's important is that it's ever evolving. So yes, there are 9 steps. And when you get to the 9th one, you're likely to come back to the first one again. And this is how it will evolve, because it takes you through control as the first one, understanding what you can and can't control, and liberating yourself from everything you can't, to free yourself up to spend time on what matters. This is the part of purpose, to then challenge the status quo, to really understand what is going on in your life and work. Are you aligned? To capture who you are, because the capture piece is really critical in terms of who is it that is showing up in every circumstance. And when I wrote this book, I'd lived it. So I knew that it was possible. I've also been coaching for many years now, using this framework, not as overtly as it's now written, but in essence, that's what it was. And this isn't also just something that has arrived today. This is something that has been current for decades, centuries, because when I look back, and my co-author is my late grandfather, I use excerpts of his fabulous journal he kept for 5 years as a prisoner of war. And there is this process there. Obviously
And
not.
you interviewed him.
I did.
When was it? You 13?
I was 15. And so this is a whole story separately to the framework, but there is a reason why he's part of this journey and part of the book with me. I wanted to write a book about purpose, a self-development book, but I didn't want it to be just another personal development book. I wanted there to be a difference. And I had this idea of writing a book from my grandfather's perspective. And he used to tell me wonderful stories when I was little. I spent a lot of time with him. In fact, pretty much every day of my life was spent with him. And so, yeah, he was a storyteller. He was this fabulous person who had so much knowledge and breadth of interest. I couldn't possibly tell stories from his perspective. He was the person that you would go from room to room to be with, particularly at a party, to listen to these incredible stories. He was also a playwright. He wrote for TV, radio and stage. So, yeah, how am I going to write this book from his perspective and with all these brilliant purpose life lessons hidden amongst them? So, yeah, I had imposter syndrome. I sought help from a coach, and she helped me to have this conversation with my grandfather, my late grandfather. Essentially, it was a pep talk. I was giving myself a pep talk. And I realised that my podcasting was an extension of his broadcasting and that I'd been telling stories anyway. So just get the book written, Amy. Just stop holding yourself prisoner there. So I started writing, and bizarrely, 10 days later after I started writing, my grandmother passed unexpectedly. And in her possessions, I found this journal that had never seen the light of day. Certainly, my mum hadn't seen it. And when I opened it, it opened to a page where he had this written on the 30th of September, 1942, proposal to write way of life, to meet every circumstance of life, every facet of living. And I was like, this is so crazy. I close every podcast episode with have a purpose, have a plan, focus on why. That's the three steps: purpose, plan, focus. And here he is.
What a legacy for him.
Yeah,
though.
like 100 years before, not
I can
100
feel,
years, 80 years before.
I think it's a wonderful story. And the fact that then you found more possessions.
And that's where the
cassette.
tape, that's where I found the tape. And I'd interviewed him, age 15, about his time as a prisoner of war. So no, I wasn't a podcaster in 2019. I was a podcaster way back in 1990.
There was a clue there, right? As from a career perspective.
Absolutely. So this was, okay, universe is sending me messages. You've got the book, you've got the interview. I then had a PhD student from Australia reach out to me and say, I've got all his plays from his time when he was out here. I'm studying him at the moment. Would you like them? Yes, please. I had articles sent to me from America. All these pieces were coming together. I had found all the letters that he wrote and received while he was a prisoner of war. I found his university degree that he got while he was a prisoner of war. So many pieces coming together. So the components of the book are such that this is a universal framework that works to release yourself from the prison that you're holding yourself in, or physically, whatever, my grandfather. You can mentally liberate yourself. And that is what the framework does. It takes you through from existing through to living and creating that purposeful way of life. And with that, one of the components is the financial area.
Wow, so much. And so tell me a little bit more about what he did when he was a prisoner of war.
So he refused to escape. He was called daft by his other fellow prisoners, officers, because he was in an officers' camp. What they didn't realise is that he had already escaped. He had that mental liberation because he wrote every day. Before the war, he was training to be an accountant. He was 21. He was so young. So here he is from 22 through to 27. These are really core years of his life. And he spent them writing, learning, studying, crafting his skills so that when he came out, he went into a job at the BBC as a writer. And because he's used that time really wisely.
Which you described earlier on, if you was talking to your younger self in your 20s, and you said the thing to do is see what all the opportunities you are and learn and develop. So that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, I am the living, breathing version of my grandfather. I'm very aware of that. And also with that comes a lot of the failings, trappings of wanting to be brilliant, wanting to achieve, wanting to succeed, but go against the grain sometimes, which is what he did. And that's proof also that he refused to escape physically because he thought it was perilous, and he wanted to enjoy his life after being held prisoner. And that's what he went on to do.
So how do people start to draft the purpose and their why? How do they start? Is it looking at those serendipitous moments and looking back, you were interviewing your grandfather at 15 and sort of noting those kind of things that you naturally do, and sort of understanding your strengths. And my dad used to always say to me, Rebecca, that mouth of yours is going to get you into serious trouble one of these days. And I wasn't academic at school. I now realise, and I've said this to him all the time, with great pleasure, that my mouth is actually my biggest and greatest asset. I could literally sit talking to you all day. I wasn't nervous about it. I wasn't worried about it. I won't be tired after doing, several podcasts or meetings in a day. And so that's what I've started to lean in on. Is actually, well, do the things that you enjoy. Is it as simple as that?
It is definitely a component, for sure. When you are effortlessly in flow, which is what you're describing right now, it's because there is no push against anything that is restricting you or not aligned. It's absolutely within everything that you stand for to be helping women particularly with their financial future. And this is one of the components that you're doing that. So you understand your mouth will get you in trouble if you say the wrong thing, though. So he was right. That was good advice, right? There is always that. But it is one component. There are several components. What is really key is that you won't find your purpose by searching for it externally. It is created and it is felt within. It is very much a case of understanding who you are and what it is that you want to do. And that becomes your overarching intention. Your purpose in life is that. It's your overarching intention that guides your direction. The why is the meaningful significance that you assign to that. It's the real understanding of what it is and what it means to you to live with that intention.
Okay, so then why do I do what I do? Like, I've done this for 15 years. I've done a podcast, a TED Talk, I wrote a book. I look at that and I think, well, is it just from my upbringing, or is it because of the numerous conversations I've had with clients over the years? Is it the injustice? I think it could be all of those things, I think.
They're all components. I would ask you, what is it that you stand for? If you were out at the pub and you overheard somebody should really do something about, what is the answer to that for you?
But there's certain things that get us going, don't they? There's certain things, for example, online, there's certain subjects that people are more passionate about than others. So, neurodiversity for children in schools and the injustice of what certain children are having to go through in school environments that's a personal thing to me because of my own children. So I think there's certain buttons that get pushed that then cause the action, because we can all sit there moaning and saying, oh, the injustice of the world, and we can sit here you and I could rant about numerous things, but actually what we're going to do about it, what really gets us to the point where we're actually going to create this passion and purpose and to actually go and make a difference. I find that intriguing, what really does that. I think for me, I was completely financially literate growing up. I didn't even understand what a bank account was. My dad opened my bank account when I was 18. I didn't come from money. I lived in a council house as a single parent. And I had my first job in a bank when I was 19. I was a cashier as a temp. I shouldn't have ever been there. It was just a complete coincidence, serendipitous, whatever you want to call it. Within 6 months, I was a head cashier, and then the rest is history. I never went to university. I wasn't academic. I took my first financial exams when I was 21. So I never planned or thought I'd work in financial services. I was never at school thinking, oh, I'll go and work in a bank. That would be the last thing I'd ever going to do. So it was never really, to me, obvious that that's where I'd be where I am today. But I guess over that period, I had a point to prove. And that sometimes I did at one stage. I'd done the TEDx talk, I'd done the book, I'd won multiple awards, all of that stuff. And then I just stopped one day. There was another awards application thing going through, all of that kind of, what happens every year. There's like a seasonal period where that happens in financial services. And I just stopped. I was halfway through an application. I said, no, I'm not doing this. Why am I doing this? I don't need to prove to anybody else. I never have done, but I realised I was trying to prove to myself. So sometimes a lot of my motivations were down to my own sort of that self-image, I guess I was talking about earlier about, proving to myself that I could achieve more than I set out to. And then once I got over that and I realised I didn't need that anymore, I just focused on helping everyday people, kept my head down and just did the work every day, talking to lots of different people, helping lots of people in lots of different ways. But why I do that, sometimes, I definitely couldn't go and work at another financial services firm where I was, and I don't mean this in a rude way, but helping multi-billionaire kind of people who have more money they don't know what to do with. I like helping sort of the middle kind of class of people that want to have a legacy for their children. They want to retire comfortably. They often are working hard, and I like helping those kind of people because I feel like I'm making a bigger difference. And then helping the underdog, if you like, which to me is women in that example, again, it's making a bigger impact and a bigger difference. So I think that's what it comes down to. Whether there's an ego in there somewhere, possibly, but I think that's difficult to do when you're having to work really hard and you're doing all the things that you're doing, that you don't really see all that gratification. You don't, there's not like an online loads of gratification from that because you're just head down doing the work every day, speaking to people and helping people. But to me, a lot of my passion, I guess, and my purpose is around having a bigger impact and making a bigger difference. I could just do what I'm doing, work for an investment bank or work for a wealth management firm, earning probably 4 times of what I earn now, but that wouldn't really give me very much joy.
And I think that's what's important, is that your shift from when you're in the middle of that application of the praise and encouragement that you would receive from potentially winning that award isn't as much as knowing and receiving the praise that you get from your one-to-one work. So it's just shifted. You're still getting the admiration for what you're doing, but you're getting it in a meaningful way. And that's what's changed for you, is just now how you are recognized for your work is very different, and you're seeking it in a different way and you're getting it. And that's what's changed. The meaningful success for you is portrayed slightly different.
So how do people become brave to make those transitions? How do people look at let's just say that someone's listening right now, they're not happy at work, they're not happy in their business, maybe things aren't going quite as well, they want to make a change, they want to make a difference. What's sort of just some baby steps that they could start doing?
Yeah, so this is my focus on why right now, is to help people understand the existential crisis that's going on, which is because they've outsourced their fulfillment. And I know for sure that Gallup has said in their latest State of the Workplace report that 79% are either actively disengaged or not engaged in their work. So this is a problem because people have outsourced. How am I being motivated? What is it I enjoy doing? So going back to earlier, I'm not saying you need to jump ship. You don't. There's probably ways that you can become more fulfilled in your everyday life. In fact, that's exactly what I'm helping people to look for. And it's about taking personal agency. What I mean by that is understanding that you give each moment a meaning, and you get to choose what that meaning is. So you might assign a meaning to a particular moment based on how you feel in that particular moment. You might feel angry, and therefore this is what it now means. But you get to choose again. No, it's not anger. Actually, it's gratitude. And that then shapes what happens next. So this is about taking responsibility. And when you do that, everything transforms thereafter. Really appreciating everything and realizing that you have a choice. This is the mental liberation piece again that I've been speaking about pretty much the whole time we've been talking. So when you recognize that you are responsible for your life and your work and for the meaning that you are making of it, that's when everything changes.
You make it sound so easy. You make that sound so simple. But I think there's, in everyday moments, we can, I guess, it's recognising how are we reacting, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, this morning my husband was moaning that there was bowls all over the kitchen and they weren't like in the right cupboard or whatever. And I took that meaning to be I'm not tidy. I took it all very personal, and that was the meaning. But that wasn't the meaning. He was just saying they're not in the cupboard, but I took it how. So I think I'm just using that as a very flippant example off the top of my head. But I think it's recognising how not only we're reacting to certain circumstances, how we're coming across in conversations, but then also how we're internalising it. And I've recognised actually I can be really sensitive to those kind of conversations. I take it really personally. There's this real perfectionist part there that kicks in. And that's the part of the self-image and that I'm working on at the moment. But I've done years and years of development. I've had like one-to-one coaching with Intense for a year. That was a few years ago now, and I've done more work since, and there's still more work to do. But I think if you're in it and you're doing the work and you start to have that reflection, but working with a coach, especially if you are really wanting to make a difference, that intense period that your granddad had in a camp. Was it a concentration camp?
No, it wasn't. It was an officers' prisoner of war camp.
Right.
They're very different in terms of how they got treated. So whilst he was in a camp, it was uncertain. Every day was uncertain. They weren't fed well. They weren't particularly looked after, but it was by no means to the levels of a concentration camp. Yeah.
But we can be in our own, like you described, our own brick wall, our own prison. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So that's, equally mindset wise, when you might be trapped in a relationship, trapped in a job, just feel like you're trapped with your finances. There's no way forward, in lots of debt. Whatever and even you might have a lot of money sitting in the bank account, but you're still not feeling fulfilled or happy, and you don't know where to go. Whatever the situation is, you're burnt out, you're not healthy, you're eating the wrong things, you want to go to the gym, but you just don't have the time or the energy or the motivation. Don't even start with the menopause,
This is what I call a purpose gap. This is a gap between your intention and the actual impact that you are wanting to create. And if they are not aligned, you're going to have this big gap in between. And the only way you can close that is by aligning yourself. Going back to your confrontation with your husband this morning about the breakfast bowls, every situation, circumstance is a meeting of two sets of values coming together. And wherever there's a clash, it's because one of them is being conflicted in one way. So you spoke earlier about how he's focused on security. He wasn't feeling comfortable in his environment. He wasn't feeling secure because of the mess. It's as simple as that. He wasn't blaming you. He was just saying, this is not a nice environment for me. I'd like it to be tidier. So a meeting of values happens in the workplace. It happens on the tube. Somebody this morning I saw having an argument because somebody put a bag on their seat and he wanted to sit down. And it's just a case of space, freedom. And
once people realise the gap, which they start to then the prison maybe starts to crumble a little bit around them, and they start to figure out, okay,
that's the awareness piece. This is the reflection with action.
Definitely, I can hear that. And then you start to figure out, okay, I like doing this, and I quite like that part of my job. Maybe you start to see more gratitude, you start to see more positives. Doors maybe start opening that you didn't maybe notice before. You might start saying yes to things. Is it as simple as that in terms of the 9 steps process, or?
Yeah. So again, what I I'm talking about is reflection with action. Reflection is where you are looking at the meaning of a moment, and action is where the purpose is then put into motion. So this is how the why and the purpose come together to form. So the why is the reflection piece, the assigning the meaning, and then the purpose is in the motion that you take the action subsequently. So if you can start to model this as a practice, reflection with action, having gone through the steps, which are to control, to create, to challenge, to capture, that then goes on to choose, to create, to collaborate. It then goes into commit, to contribute, and change. Those are the 9 C's of the framework. It is a case of, yes, it is ongoing work. Purpose is your life's work, and it will evolve and it will change as you do. It also requires you to take action. It's not passive. It is definitely work in progress. You're not going to get it right. I'm certainly no means perfect. In fact, I talk about embracing imperfection, because perfect is just an impossibility to achieve. And it's mostly rooted in a fear or self-doubt or low self-worth. So focusing on how actually I can be this best version of myself, that's about the potential. That's about growth. That's about learning. And it's also about being vulnerable, which is key here.
Yeah, it's very much so. I would agree with that. And then from there, though, there are, I think, for a lot of people, I can just imagine people listening, and you're talking about thinking about maybe like 10, 20, 30 years time, or financially sort of thinking, okay, what do I want that future to look like? But for some people, I can quite imagine, I know that when I was in a really difficult spot, I was in a really bad grief cycle, I couldn't make any decisions about anything. And it was a case about having to take a real step back, say no to a lot of things, just sort of try and anchor myself somehow and ground myself somehow. So there are situations that are quite tricky for people. I from my own personal circumstances, where they can't really think about 10 years' time. They just need to figure out how they're going to pay the bills next month, kind of stuff. So is there any advice that you would give for those people that are in that sort of, more really stressful situations that need maybe more smaller baby steps, because they can't think purpose, passion, big picture. They can only think about tomorrow, next week.
100% agree. And this is something that is part of becoming one of many women's coach, is to understand what your core needs are just to be okay on a daily basis. Because if they're not being met, by all means, it's going to be an impossibility to create a future. Because if your health is not good, then your health and your body is going to say no to anything that's going to require more effort. So you can't vision your purpose if you are not able to get through each day because you're tired, you're not eating well, you're not creating enough movement in your life and having that exercise as part of your key area. So yeah, look at the basics first, like strip it right down to sleep, attention to water, food, all of the basics that are going to create this, I'm okay now, and now I can focus on what comes next. So yes, baby steps, 100%. And if that's a case of, I need to understand where I am today, this week, this month, in terms of finance, I'm not going to advocate how to do that because everybody's got a personal circumstance. But just know that if you're not getting through a day, it's likely that one of your core needs is not being met.
And you mentioned joy in the book as well. You mentioned there's a section on joy. And I know that when I was in that sort of cycle, I really had to sort of focus on, okay, what is going to make me happy this weekend? What small thing could I do that's going to bring me, walking the dog, taking my little boy to the park, like really basic stuff. And I was just making sure that I wasn't running around after everybody. I wasn't stressed out. I had to really scale back and just create some small moments of joy. And at that time where I couldn't see joy in anything, like everything was just grey and upsetting, quite frankly. So that's how I moved through that.
I think there is a myth that purpose has to be this grand mission in life. actually, it is about the small moments. And it's about the small moments that you are bringing into your everyday. It's about celebrating those. And I talk about every day, at the end of the day, just celebrating the little things that made you laugh, made you smile, just reflecting on those, because otherwise they pass and you don't notice them.
Definitely.
And they're there. They
Yeah.
are there. There will be a moment or two, even in the darkest times. Again, it comes back to you get to choose.
And on that note, I think that's a really nice way to finish my question time. It's felt like I hope it's not felt like an interrogation.
Not
I
at
think it's been
all.
wonderful. But talk to me just very briefly about your Meaningful Success Mastermind. So you have your book, you have your podcast. There's lots of great ways to connect with Amy. But just tell me a little bit about your mastermind for people that maybe want to jump in.
Yeah, I recognised that there was an opportunity for a deep dive, understanding on who you are, what it is you want to do. And often there's a feeling, a sense that something's just not quite right, something's missing in my life. There's this, can't quite name it, but I just know that must be more to life than this. And that's what the Meaningful Success Mastermind is about. Understanding actually there are different ways to measure and mark success. There's a different way of defining it, and it's very personal. So what the mastermind does is brings together 8 professionals who are either in the workplace or they have their own business, and they are working towards individually understanding what matters to them, but doing that in a collective environment. Because what happens when you do that is you understand that you're not alone, that there are other people out there who are also experiencing this sense of things aren't quite right and there must be more to life than this. And with that, they see the growth, they see the possibility, they see the transformation together, they grow together. And it's a 12-week program, but then that you get the choice to stay together in monthly calls, which is what people tend to do because it's just so much fun. They redefine what is going on for each of them, and they have the freedom to do that. They hold the space for them to do that for each other, and it's just beautiful to watch this change and shift of understanding just how much they can be in control of their choices, having felt not been in charge of that at all.
And what a great way for you to, as a business owner and living a meaningful purpose in your own life, to see that being delivered and as an outcome. And it's taken obviously, many versions of yourself and transformations for you to be at that point where you are actually living a successful, meaningful life with your husband, been now retired for quite some time. You have created in brackets, passive income, but with properties to manage. And now you can enjoy your beautiful garden in your new house, right?
Oh my goodness. I am obsessed with my new garden. We wanted something sort of low maintenance. A lock up and leave was the plan. And it is that. We are actually going to be doing some work on it. But the garden just brings so much joy, and it ticks all the boxes for me in terms of the growth, the opportunity, the what lies beneath the surface, because you just don't know what lies beneath the surface and you have to wait. It's all about that deferred gratification. I don't know what each season is going to bring to me in terms of colour and plants that are hiding there. I call it a fertile void, and it's a case of under the ground there's still things happening. And it's the same for us, is that just because you're not busy full time doesn't mean that things aren't evolving and changing.
Love that And maybe I can come and see your spring garden next year. I'd love that. Well, happy birthday for next week, Amy. Thank you so much for joining us. I've really enjoyed our chat. We've covered so much today. Thank you so much, Amy. We've covered your transformation from your career, building a property portfolio, retiring your partner, downsizing, creating purpose in life, and what meaningful change you can have. We've covered so much. So thank you so much for joining and sharing your knowledge.
Thank you. It's been an absolute privilege and pleasure to do so. I just hope that there has been a moment for someone that has created an ongoing reflection with action for them.
Thank you for joining us today at Accelerating Your Wealth with your host, myself, Rebecca Robertson. I hope you enjoyed the show. Do subscribe and let us know in the comments any of your thoughts.